It wasn't the turbulence that silenced Flight 902 to Zurich. It was the sound of saliva hitting the cheek of the most respected man in the cabin. One second, a wealthy socialite was screaming about her rights. The next, she committed an act so vile it froze 50 people in their seats. But she didn't know who she had just assaulted. She didn't know that the man wiping her spit from his face was the only person on earth who could save the life of the person she loved most. And she certainly didn't expect the captain to cut the engines, turn the plane around, and deliver the 7 words that would end her life as she knew it. This isn't just a story about racism. It's a story about the most brutal, immediate karma you will ever hear. The air inside the Sovereign Lounge at JFK International Airport smelled of expensive espresso and old money. It was a place where the silence was heavy, broken only by the soft clinking of china and the hushed tones of business deals that cost more than most people earned in a decade. Dr. Anthony Caldwell sat in a corner wingback chair, nursing a sparkling water with a slice of lime. At 45, Anthony carried himself with the quiet, unassuming confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. He was dressed in a charcoal cashmere sweater and dark denim, clean, sharp, but comfortable for the 8-hour flight to Zurich ahead. He checked his watch, a vintage Omega that had been a gift from his late father. He wasn't traveling for leisure. In his leather satchel were the medical files for a high-stakes symposium in Switzerland, where he was the keynote speaker on pediatric cardiothoracic surgery. But more importantly, he was flying to perform a pro bono surgery on a refugee child who had been airlifted to Zurich specifically for his expertise. It was a tight schedule. He needed to land, sleep for 4 hours, and scrub in. "Can I get you a refill, Dr. Caldwell?" Anthony looked up and smiled at the lounge attendant, a young woman named Chloe who knew him by name. "I'm fine, Chloe, thank you, just counting down the minutes." "Full flight tonight?" she asked, clearing a napkin. "Looks like it," Anthony said, his eyes drifting across the lounge. "Hopefully a quiet one." His gaze landed on a commotion near the buffet. A woman, likely in her late 50s, was berating a server because the cucumber sandwiches had crusts on them. She was draped in a beige trench coat that screamed Burberry, clutching a Louis Vuitton never-full bag as if it contained the nuclear codes. Her blonde hair was coiffed into a rigid, motionless helmet. This was Beatrice Halloway. Beatrice was the wife of Richard Halloway, a real estate mogul who had made a fortune flipping distressed properties in the Midwest. Beatrice had never worked a day in her life, but she managed her social status with the ferocity of a 4-star general. She wasn't just wealthy, she was angry and wealthy, a dangerous combination. "Do you know who my husband is?" Beatrice's voice cut through the lounge's ambient jazz. "If I want the crusts off, you take them off before you bring the tray out. I shouldn't have to explain basic service to someone like you." The server, a Hispanic man named Hector, bowed his head. "I apologize, Mrs. Halloway. I will get a fresh batch." "Don't bother," she snapped, grabbing a handful of napkins and tossing them onto the counter. "I've lost my appetite. Just make sure my champagne is chilled on the plane. And not that domestic swill you tried to pass off last time." Anthony watched the scene, his jaw tightening slightly. He had seen 1,000 Beatrices in his life. In the hospital corridors, they were the ones who demanded private rooms when none were available, who treated nurses like furniture, who believed their insurance premiums bought them the right to dehumanize others. He took a sip of water, hoping she wasn't in business class. But as the boarding announcement chimed for Flight 902, Beatrice Halloway marched toward the gate with her platinum boarding pass in hand, cutting in front of a young mother with a stroller. Anthony sighed, picked up his bag, and followed. He had a bad feeling about this. The cabin of the Boeing 777 was a haven of soft blue LED lighting and plush leather seats. Anthony found his seat, 2B, an aisle seat in the front row of business class. He stowed his bag overhead and settled in, pulling out a medical journal to read. He preferred to keep to himself before takeoff, mentally preparing for the surgery in Zurich. He was just adjusting his noise-cancelling headphones when a heavy bag slammed into his shoulder. "Watch it," a sharp voice hissed. Anthony looked up. It was her, Beatrice Halloway, and as fate would have it, she was in seat 2A, the window seat directly next to him. "My apologies," Anthony said instinctively, though he hadn't moved an inch. He shifted his legs to give her room to pass. Beatrice didn't move. She stood in the aisle, staring down at him with a look of undisguised disgust. Her eyes raked over his face, his skin, his hair, and then down to his casual cashmere sweater. She didn't see a world-renowned surgeon. She saw a black man in a seat she felt he didn't belong in. "You're in my way," she said, her voice icy. "I'm giving you room, Ma'am," Anthony said, his voice calm, practiced. He had dealt with angry parents of sick children for 20 years. He knew how to de-escalate. Beatrice huffed and squeezed past him, making a point to knock her oversized purse against his head as she sat down. She settled into 2A, immediately hitting the call button before the plane had even pushed back from the gate. A flight attendant, Sarah, rushed over. Sarah was a veteran of the skies, 30 years flying for Royal Horizon Airlines. She had seen it all. "Yes, Mrs. Holloway? How can I help you?" Sarah asked, forcing a smile. "I need to be moved," Beatrice said loudly, not bothering to lower her voice. Sarah blinked. "Moved? Is there an issue with the seat? The mechanics?" "The seat is fine," Beatrice sneered, side-eyeing Anthony. "It's the environment. It's claustrophobic. I paid full fare for this ticket, not points, not an upgrade. I expect a certain level of exclusivity. I don't feel comfortable sitting next to him." She gestured at Anthony with a manicured hand, as if he were a pile of dirty laundry. The cabin went quiet. The other passengers in business class, a tech CEO in 1A, a German diplomat in 1B, and a young influencer couple in row 3, all stopped what they were doing. Anthony didn't look up from his journal. He kept reading a paragraph about aortic valve reconstruction, though his heart rate had ticked up. He wasn't scared. He was tired. He was so incredibly tired of this script. Sarah's expression hardened. "Ma'am, this flight is fully booked. Every seat in business is taken, and I can assure you the gentleman next to you is a valued customer." "Valued?" Beatrice scoffed. She leaned in, whispering loudly enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "I doubt he even paid for the ticket. Probably an employee pass or some diversity quota upgrade. Look at him. He's reading a magazine. Does he look like he belongs in first class?" "It's business class, ma'am," Sarah corrected firmly. "And I will ask you to lower your voice. You are disturbing the other passengers." "Don't you shush me," Beatrice snapped. "My husband, Richard Holloway, is a Diamond Medallion member. I will have your job for this. I want to speak to the captain." "The captain is busy conducting pre-flight checks," Sarah said, her patience thinning. "I can offer you a glass of champagne before takeoff, or I can check if there is a seat in premium economy if you'd prefer to sit alone. But you cannot stay here and insult another passenger." Beatrice turned purple. "Premium economy? You want to downgrade me? So he can stay here." "He hasn't done anything, ma'am," Sarah said. Beatrice whipped her head toward Anthony. "Hey, you." Anthony finally lowered his journal. He took off his glasses and turned to face her. His eyes were dark and intelligent, his face unreadable. "Yes?" "How much did you pay for this seat?" she demanded. "I'll buy it from you. Take $500 and go back to coach. You'll be happier there with your people." A collective gasp went through the cabin. The tech CEO in 1A unbuckled his seatbelt, ready to intervene. Anthony looked at her, studying her like a pathology slide. "Mrs. Holloway, is it? My ticket was purchased by the University of Zurich Hospital. I don't know the price, but I assume it was substantial. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." He put his headphones back on. It was the dismissal that broke her. Being ignored was the one thing Beatrice Holloway could not handle. The plane pushed back. The safety demonstration played. The lights dimmed. Beatrice sat fuming in the darkness, vibrating with rage. She downed 2 glasses of champagne before the wheels even left the tarmac. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign pinged off. Anthony reclined his seat slightly, opened his laptop, and began reviewing the 3D scans of the heart he would be operating on the next morning. The screen glowed with complex anatomical diagrams. Beatrice was watching him. The alcohol had mixed with her entitlement to create a toxic, volatile sludge in her brain. She pressed the call button again. Sarah appeared. "Yes, Mrs. Holloway?" "He's looking at pornography," Beatrice lied loudly, pointing at Anthony's screen. "It's disgusting. There are organs, blood. I can't eat my dinner next to this filth." Sarah looked at the screen. "Mom, that is a medical diagram. It's a heart." "It's gore," Beatrice shrieked. "Tell him to turn it off." Anthony sighed. He saved his work and closed the laptop. He couldn't work like this. He decided to try one last appeal to her humanity. He turned to her. "Mrs. Holloway," Anthony said softly, "I am a surgeon. I am flying to Zurich to operate on a 6-year-old girl tomorrow morning. I need to review these files to save her life. I am asking you, please, let's just coexist for 8 hours. You don't have to like me, but please let me do my job." Beatrice stared at him. For a second it looked like she might understand. She looked at his weary eyes, the grey in his beard. Then she sneered. "A surgeon? You? Don't make me laugh. You're probably a janitor at the hospital who stole a laptop. You people always lie." "Ma'am, that is enough." The man in 1A stood up. "Leave him alone." "Sit down," Beatrice yelled at the man. She turned back to Anthony, her face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. "You think you're so special because you're in a suit? You're nothing. You're dirt. You shouldn't even be breathing the same air as me." And then she did it. Beatrice Holloway, wife of Richard, socialite of the Upper East Side, gathered saliva in her mouth and spat. It was a wet, heavy sound. The spit hit Anthony squarely on the left cheek, just below his eye. A few droplets splattered onto the collar of his cashmere sweater. Time stopped. Anthony didn't move. He didn't wipe it away immediately. He just sat there, the shock freezing his muscles. He closed his eyes, taking a deep, trembling breath. The cabin erupted. "Oh my God!" Sarah screamed, dropping a tray of warm nuts. "She just spit on him." The influencer in row 3 yelled, holding up his phone, recording everything. "Restrain her. Get the cuffs." The German diplomat was shouting. Beatrice sat back, a look of smug satisfaction on her face. "There," she said. "Now maybe you'll know your place." Anthony slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and wiped his cheek. He looked at the wet cloth. He folded it neatly and placed it in a plastic biohazard bag he kept in his medical kit. He pressed the call button. Sarah was already there, shaking with rage. "Dr. Caldwell, I am so sorry. I have never—" "I need the captain," Anthony said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. It wasn't the voice of a victim, it was the voice of a man who held life and death in his hands every day. "And I need the police." "We are over the Atlantic, sir," Sarah stammered. "Tell the captain," Anthony said, looking Sarah in the eye, "that a biological assault has occurred, and that I am pressing charges. Now." Sarah ran to the cockpit. Beatrice laughed. "Police? In the sky? Good luck. By the time we land in Zurich, I'll have my lawyers wipe the floor with you. You'll be lucky if you don't get deported." She picked up her champagne glass again, but 3 minutes later the plane banked sharply to the left. The pitch of the engines changed from a steady hum to a roaring whine. The nose of the plane dipped. Beatrice frowned. "Why are we turning?" The intercom crackled to life. It wasn't the flight attendant's voice. It was the deep, gravelly voice of Captain Robert "Bob" Miller. And he sounded furious. The Boeing 777 was a beast of engineering, a vessel designed to cross oceans. But under the command of Captain Robert Miller, it felt as agile as a fighter jet. The plane didn't just turn, it banked with an aggression that pressed passengers into their seats. The hum of the engines, usually a comforting white noise, had deepened into a growl as the thrusters reversed power to scrub speed. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was lethal. Captain Miller, a man with 20 years in the Air Force and another 15 in commercial aviation, was not a man who tolerated disrespect. But what Sarah, the lead flight attendant, had whispered to him over the interphone wasn't just disrespect. It was a violation of the ancient laws of the sky, the sanctity of the cabin. He keyed the mic, his hand shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a suppressed volcanic anger. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," Miller's voice boomed through the cabin, overriding the in-flight entertainment systems. Screens went black. The ambient music cut out. "You may have noticed that we have initiated a sharp turn and are descending. We are not continuing to Zurich." A murmur of confusion rippled through economy and premium. But in business class, the silence was absolute. Everyone was looking at seat 2A. "We are returning to JFK immediately," Miller continued, his voice devoid of the usual customer service warmth. Federal aviation regulations strictly prohibit the assault of any passenger or crew member aboard an aircraft. Tonight, an act of physical battery occurred in our forward cabin that I find personally repugnant. I will not cross the Atlantic with a violent offender on my ship. We are dumping fuel to reach safe landing weight, and police are standing by at the gate. Beatrice Halloway blinked. The alcohol in her system was making it hard to process the words. Violent offender. She looked around. Was there a terrorist on board? A drunk in economy? Finally, she muttered, smoothing her skirt. They're taking us back to get rid of someone. Probably that crying baby in row 12. She turned to Anthony. He was still sitting perfectly still, the biohazard bag containing the soiled handkerchief resting on his tray table. He hadn't said a word to her since the incident. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw set in a line of granite. You hear that? Beatrice hissed at him, emboldened by her own delusion. The captain is turning around. I bet Sarah told him what you did. Threatening a woman. Looking at pornography. You're finished. Anthony slowly turned his head. His eyes were tired, filled with a profound pity that Beatrice mistook for defeat. Mrs. Halloway, Anthony said, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated in the quiet cabin. I suggest you gather your belongings. You are going to need your identification. Don't tell me what to do, she snapped. I'm the victim here. You invaded my space. You exist. Ma'am, please be quiet, the tech CEO in 1A said, leaning over the divider. You have done enough. Mind your business, Beatrice shrieked. You're all in on it. It's reverse racism, that's what it is. Because I'm white, I'm the villain. I demand to speak to the captain. I demand Richard gets them on the phone. She fumbled for her phone, but there was no signal at this altitude. She slammed it down on the armrest. The flight back was agonizingly short. The plane, heavy with fuel, had to circle off the coast of Long Island to jettison thousands of gallons of kerosene. It was a literal burning of money. Tens of thousands of dollars vanishing into the mist because one woman couldn't control her hate. As the fuel dumped, the smell of kerosene faintly permeated the cabin, a reminder of the waste. Sarah walked down the aisle, her face stone. She stopped at row 2. Mr. Caldwell, she said softly, ignoring Beatrice entirely. The airline has already arranged a private charter for you. It's a Gulfstream G650 waiting at the tarmac. As soon as we clear this situation, a car will take you directly there. You will still make your surgery time. Beatrice's eyes widened. Private charter? For him? Who is paying for that? Royal Horizon Airlines is, Sarah said, finally looking at Beatrice. We protect our valued guests, and Dr. Caldwell is a hero in the medical community. Unlike some people, he actually contributes to the human race. Beatrice gasped. How dare you? I am reporting you. What is your last name? I will own this airline by Monday. My name is Sarah Jenkins, the flight attendant said, and you can spell it however you like in your police report. The landing gear deployed with a heavy thud. The plane descended into the lights of New York, a city that tolerated many things but had no patience for what was about to happen. The plane taxied to a remote stand, far away from the main terminal. This wasn't a standard gate arrival, this was a crime scene containment protocol. Flashing blue and red lights illuminated the tarmac, reflecting off the wet pavement. There wasn't just one police car. There were 4 Port Authority vehicles, an ambulance, standard protocol for biological assault, and 2 black SUVs with federal plates. The seatbelt sign dinged off, but the captain's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. No one is to stand up. We are waiting for local law enforcement to board the aircraft. Beatrice smirked, crossing her arms. Good. About time they came for him. She looked at Anthony. I hope you like prison food. Although I'm sure you're used to it. Anthony didn't respond. He was texting on his phone, likely updating his surgical team in Zurich. The forward cabin door opened. The cold night air rushed in. 3 officers from the Port Authority Police Department marched onto the plane. Behind them was a man in a suit, FBI. Assaulting a passenger on an international flight was a federal felony. The lead officer, a burly sergeant with a thick New York accent, scanned the cabin. He held a tablet with a passenger manifest. "We are looking for seat 2A, the sergeant announced. Beatrice let out a triumphant huff. "Finally, over here, officer. Seat 2A is here, but the problem is in 2B. She pointed an accusing finger at Anthony. The sergeant walked down the aisle, his boots heavy on the carpet. He stopped at row 2. He looked at Beatrice. Then he looked at Anthony. "Dr. Caldwell?" the sergeant asked, his tone respectful. "Yes, Sergeant," Anthony said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Stay right there, sir. We need to take your statement, but first, we need to secure the scene." Beatrice smiled. "See, secure the scene. Get him out of here." The sergeant turned his body fully toward Beatrice. His hand went to the handcuffs on his belt. "Beatrice Halloway," he said, his voice flat and hard, "please stand up and turn around." Beatrice froze. Her brain couldn't compute the words. "Excuse me." "Stand up, turn around. Hands behind your back," the sergeant repeated louder this time. "Me?" Beatrice laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. No, you're confused. He attacked me. He was being aggressive. He's the threat." "Ma'am, we have 3 witness statements from the flight crew and corroboration from the passenger in 1A, stating that you assaulted this man with bodily fluids," the sergeant said. "Now stand up, or we will assist you." "Assault? It was spit," Beatrice screamed. "I didn't hit him. I was making a point. It's freedom of speech." "Spitting on someone is battery, ma'am. And on an aircraft, it's interference with a flight crew. Stand up." Beatrice clung to the armrests. "No, I am Beatrice Halloway. My husband is Richard Halloway. You touch me and you'll be directing traffic in Jersey for the rest of your miserable life." The FBI agent stepped forward. "Mrs. Halloway, I am Agent Miller with the FBI. You are currently delaying a federal investigation. If you do not comply, we will add resisting arrest to your charges. And let me tell you, federal judges do not care who your husband is." Beatrice looked around for support. She looked at the influencer couple in row 3. They were filming, phones held high. "Help me," she cried out to them. "They're hurting me." "Actually, you're trending on Twitter right now," the influencer girl said, her voice dripping with judgment. "Halloway hate crime is #1. You're done, lady." Beatrice's face went pale. The reality of the modern world crashed down on her. She wasn't in the country club anymore. She was in the viral arena. The sergeant didn't wait any longer. He reached in, grabbed Beatrice by the wrist, and pulled her out of the seat. She flailed, knocking her champagne glass onto the floor. "Get off me! Richard! Richard!" She was spun around, and the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked onto her wrists. The sound was final. "Beatrice Halloway, you are under arrest for assault and interfering with the operation of an aircraft," the sergeant recited. They marched her down the aisle. As she passed the other passengers, there was no sympathy. The German diplomat in 1B shook his head. The tech CEO in 1A applauded slowly. Beatrice was dragged off the plane, her heels dragging on the carpet, her Burberry coat twisted. Once she was gone, the cabin exhaled. The FBI agent turned to Anthony. "Dr. Caldwell, I apologize for the ordeal. Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine," Anthony said, standing up and straightening his sweater. "I just need to wash my face properly, and I need to get to Zurich." "The private jet is fueled and waiting, Doctor," Sarah said, appearing with his coat. "The airline has moved your bags. You'll be in the air in 20 minutes. You'll actually arrive earlier than this flight would have." Anthony nodded. "Thank you, Sarah. And please, thank the captain for me. He did the right thing." "He knows," Sarah smiled. "Go save that kid." The holding cell at JFK's police substation was nothing like the Sovereign Lounge. It was a concrete box painted a depressing shade of institutional beige. It smelled of bleach and despair. A single metal bench was bolted to the floor. Beatrice Halloway sat on the bench, shivering. They had taken her coat, her bag, and her shoelaces. Her hair was a mess. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only a cold, gnawing pit of terror in her stomach. She had been processed, fingerprinted, mugshot taken. The humiliation was total. The officer had made her wipe the smudge of mascara from her eye with a rough paper towel. "One phone call," the desk sergeant had said. She had dialed Richard immediately. Now she sat waiting for him to arrive. She had told him it was a misunderstanding, a mix-up. That a thug had attacked her and the police were confused. Richard would fix it. Richard always fixed it. He knew the police commissioner, he knew the mayor. The heavy steel door buzzed and clicked open. Beatrice jumped up, rushing to the bars. "Richard, oh thank God, get me out of here. These animals." But it wasn't a lawyer, it was Richard Halloway himself. He stood on the other side of the bars, still in his tuxedo from the charity gala he had been attending when he got the call. But he didn't look like the powerful tycoon he usually was. He looked grey, old. His hands were trembling. "Richard," Beatrice whispered, "why are you looking at me like that? Tell them to open the door." Richard didn't move. He held up his phone. On the screen was the video the influencer had taken. It showed Beatrice's face, twisted in hate, spitting on the quiet, dignified man in seat 2B. The audio was crystal clear. "You're dirt. You shouldn't even be breathing the same air as me." "Richard, that's taken out of context," Beatrice pleaded. "He provoked me. He was—" "Shut up," Richard said. His voice wasn't loud. It was a whisper of pure horror. "Just shut up, Beatrice. Don't talk to me like that. I am your wife. Do you know who that is?" Richard pointed a shaking finger at the man in the video on his phone. "Do you have any idea who you just spit on? Some nobody, some affirmative action doctor." Richard closed his eyes. A tear leaked out, cutting through the powder on his cheek. "That is Dr. Anthony Caldwell, the chief of pediatric cardiothoracic surgery at Mount Sinai, the leading specialist in Europe and America for congenital heart defects." Beatrice blinked. So he's a doctor. Who cares? Richard slammed his hand against the bars, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Beatrice jumped back. "Beatrice, think. Why was he going to Zurich? Why was he on that plane tonight?" He said he had a surgery," Beatrice stammered. "A little girl." "Yes," Richard said, his voice breaking. "A little girl. My granddaughter, Sophie." The air left the room. Beatrice felt her knees give way. She sat back down on the metal bench hard. "What?" she whispered. "Sophie," Richard repeated. "My son's daughter. The one you made us cut off 10 years ago because his wife wasn't from the right stock. The one I have been secretly sending money to for years because she was born with a hole in her heart." Beatrice shook her head. No, that's not." "Sophie is in London. They moved her to Zurich 3 days ago," Richard said, tears now flowing freely. "Her condition went critical. The doctors said there was only one man who could attempt the reconstruction. One man with the hand steady enough. Dr. Anthony Caldwell." Richard looked at his wife with a look that wasn't anger anymore. It was revulsion. "I spent 6 months begging his administration to take the case. I donated $2 million to his hospital just to get a consultation. He agreed to fly out tonight to save her life tomorrow morning. Every minute counted." He held up the phone again, showing the video of Beatrice spitting. "And you," Richard choked out. "You delayed him. You assaulted him. You treated the man holding Sophie's life in his hands like he was garbage." I didn't know," Beatrice wept. "Richard, I didn't know. You have to tell him. Call him. Tell him it was me." "Tell him?" Richard laughed, a hollow, dead sound. "You think telling him you're my wife will help, after you spit in his face? I just got off the phone with the hospital in Zurich. They said Dr. Caldwell is currently on a private jet, thank God. But do you know what the airline told me? They said he was shaken, that he was humiliated. Imagine if he had decided not to go. Imagine if he had turned around and gone home because he was too traumatized to operate. But he didn't," Beatrice said, grasping for hope. "He's going. He'll save her. And then we can apologize. And I'll write a check and—" "It's over, Beatrice," Richard said. He turned his back on the bars. "What is over?" "Us," Richard said. "I called our lawyer on the way here. Not for you, for me. I'm filing for divorce in the morning." "Divorce?" Beatrice screamed. "You can't. After 30 years. "I can't be married to this," Richard gestured at her, at the cell, at the video. "I watched that video, Beatrice. And I realized, I don't just dislike what you did. I dislike you. I see the hate in you, and I can't have it near Sophie. If she survives, she will never know you exist. Richard, don't leave me here." "The lawyer will come in the morning to arrange bail," Richard said, walking toward the exit door. "Or maybe he won't. I told him not to rush. You might need some time to think about your place in the world." The heavy door slammed shut. Beatrice was alone. The silence of the cell was heavier than the silence in the lounge had been. But this time there was no champagne. There was no platinum ticket. There was only the cold realization that she had spit into the wind, and the wind had blown it right back into her soul. The Gulfstream G650 cut through the night sky over the Atlantic like a silver needle. Inside, the cabin was silent, save for the soft rush of air conditioning. Dr. Anthony Caldwell sat in a leather swivel chair, his eyes closed, but he wasn't sleeping. He was scrubbing his mind. Every surgeon has a ritual. Some listen to heavy metal, others meditate. Anthony's ritual was visualization. He would close his eyes and walk through every step of the operation he was about to perform. He would visualize the scalpel slicing the dermis, the sternal saw parting the bone the moment the pericardium was exposed. He would anticipate the bleeders, the scarring, the anomalies. But tonight, every time he closed his eyes, he saw Beatrice Halloway's face. He felt the wet, cold impact of her saliva on his cheek. He heard the word dirt. It was a poison seeping into his focus. If he carried this anger into the operating room, his hands would shake. If his hands shook, the child would die. He stood up and walked to the lavatory. He turned on the faucet, letting the water run until it was freezing cold. He splashed his face once, twice, 3 times. He looked at himself in the mirror. The spot where she had spit on him was clean, but it felt phantom burned. "Not tonight," he whispered to his reflection. "Tonight you are not a victim. Tonight you are an instrument." He went back to his seat and opened the confidential patient file again. He stared at the photo of the patient. Sophie Halloway, 6 years old, blonde hair, bright blue eyes, the same eyes as the woman who had assaulted him. The resemblance was undeniable. Anthony took a deep breath. He didn't see Beatrice's granddaughter. He saw a patient, a physiology, a puzzle to be solved. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Dr. Caldwell, we are beginning our final descent into Zurich. We have been cleared for a priority landing. An ambulance is waiting on the tarmac to transport you directly to the university hospital." "Thank you," Anthony said. The plane touched down in a flurry of snow. Zurich was buried in a white blanket, the city lights twinkling like diamonds in the cold. But there was no time for scenery. As soon as the stairs lowered, a blast of icy air hit him. A black Mercedes Sprinter van with blue lights flashing was waiting. A Swiss doctor, Dr. Braun, jumped out to meet him. "Dr. Caldwell, thank God," Braun said, grabbing Anthony's bag. "She's crashing. Her oxygen saturation is dropping. We have her on bypass, but the heart is failing. We didn't think you'd make it in time." "I'm here now," Anthony said, climbing into the van. "How long has she been under?" 40 minutes. We prepped her as soon as your pilot radioed. We're ready for you to scrub in immediately." The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and snowy streets. Anthony didn't look out the window. He was putting on his game face. The anger from the plane was boxed up, taped shut, and shoved into the deepest corner of his mind. They burst into the prep room. Anthony stripped off his cashmere sweater, the one with the microscopic remnants of Beatrice's hate on the collar, and tossed it into a corner. He scrubbed his hands, the bristles of the brush digging into his skin. Sterile, clean, focused. He walked into the operating theatre. The lights were blindingly bright, the rhythmic beeping of the monitors was fast, erratic. A team of 6 nurses and anesthesiologists looked up at him. They looked terrified. "Gown," Anthony said calmly. They dressed him. He stepped up to the table. He looked down at the small, fragile chest, already opened, the ribcage spread by retractors. The heart was there, beating weakly, an imperfect engine struggling to keep a little girl alive. "Scalpel," Anthony said. For the next 6 hours, time did not exist. There was only the tissue, the suture, the valve. The defect was worse than the scans had shown. The tissue was friable, tearing easily. It was like stitching wet tissue paper. At hour 4, the alarm screamed. "Pressure dropping. We're losing her," the anesthesiologist yelled. "She's fibrillating," Dr. Braun said, panic rising in his voice. "Paddle." "No," Anthony said, his voice cutting through the noise like a laser. "If we shock her now, we'll rupture the repair. Turn off the alarm." "But turn it off." The room went silent, save for the erratic whoosh of the bypass machine. Anthony reached his hands into the chest cavity. He cupped the small, failing heart in his hands. He closed his eyes. He could feel the chaotic electrical storm inside the muscle. For a split second, the image of Beatrice Halloway flashed in his mind. You're nothing. You're dirt. If he failed here, Beatrice would be right. He would just be another failure. No, he thought, I am the one who heals. He began to massage the heart, gently, rhythmically, squeezing with a precision that no machine could replicate. He was manually pumping blood for her. Come on, Sophie, he whispered behind his mask. Come on. He worked for 10 minutes. His arms burned. Sweat dripped down his forehead, caught by the nurse. And then he felt it. A flutter, a strong contraction, then another, lub-dub. The rhythm stabilized. She's back, Dr. Braun breathed, disbelief in his eyes. Sinus rhythm. Anthony opened his eyes. Let's finish the closure. We have a lot of work to do. The sun was rising over the Swiss Alps when Anthony finally peeled off his gloves. He was exhausted in a way that went down to his bones. He walked into the surgeon's lounge, collapsed onto a sofa, and stared at the ceiling. He had saved her. Sophie Halloway was going to live. The door opened. Anthony expected Dr. Braun, but it was a man he didn't recognize. An older man, wearing a wrinkled tuxedo that looked like he had slept in it. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face grey with fatigue and grief. It was Richard Halloway. Anthony sat up slowly. He recognized the name, and he saw the family resemblance to the woman on the plane. His guard went up immediately. Dr. Caldwell? Richard asked, his voice trembling. Mr. Halloway, Anthony said, his voice cool. If you are here to discuss the incident on the plane, I suggest you speak to my lawyer. Richard shook his head vigorously. No. No, doctor. I just saw Sophie. I saw my granddaughter. He took a step forward, then stopped, as if unworthy to approach. Dr. Braun told me what you did, Richard said. He said she died on the table. He said you brought her back with your bare hands. It was a complication, Anthony said clinically. We managed it. Richard let out a sob. He fell to his knees. Right there on the lounge floor. The billionaire real estate mogul, a man who commanded skyscrapers, was kneeling on the linoleum in front of the doctor. Get up, Mr. Halloway, Anthony said, uncomfortable. I can't, Richard wept. I can't stand up in front of you. Not after what my wife did. The room was silent for a long moment. You know? Anthony asked. I saw the video, Richard said, looking at the floor. I saw her spit on you. I saw her treat you like an animal. And then I learned that you were the only reason my granddaughter had a fighting chance. I have never felt such shame in my life. Anthony looked at the man. He saw the genuine agony. Mr. Halloway, Anthony said softly, your wife's actions are her own. You are not responsible for her hate. I am, Richard said, looking up. I enabled it, for years. I let her treat waiters, drivers, and strangers like dirt because it was easier than fighting her. I let her think she was a queen, and because of that she almost killed Sophie. If you had turned that plane around and gone home, if you had refused to operate, I would never do that, Anthony said sternly. I am a doctor. The patient comes first, always. It doesn't matter who her grandmother is. Richard nodded, wiping his eyes. I know, that's what makes you a great man. And it's what makes us unworthy. Richard reached into his tuxedo jacket pocket. He pulled out a checkbook. I know this is insulting, Richard said. I know money can't fix dignity. But I have written a check to the pediatric wing of this hospital for $10 million. In your name. Anthony looked at the check. It was a staggering amount. Enough to fund the department for 5 years. Enough to save thousands of Sophies. And, Richard continued, I want you to know, Beatrice is in jail in New York. I have instructed my lawyers not to post bail. She will sit there until the arraignment. And when she gets out, she will have nothing. I filed for divorce this morning. Anthony stood up. He walked over to Richard and offered a hand to help him up. Mr. Halloway, Anthony said, take care of your granddaughter. Teach her to be kind. That is the only payment I need. Richard grasped Anthony's hand, weeping openly. I will. I promise you, she will never be like Beatrice. Never. While Dr. Caldwell was sleeping the sleep of the just in a Zurich hotel, Beatrice Halloway was experiencing a very different reality. She was arraigned in Queen's Criminal Court at 9 a.m. on Monday. Usually, a woman of her stature would have been processed quietly, slipped out the back door, and the story buried. But the video was viral. It had 50 million views on X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok. The hashtag #JodaPlaneSpitter was trending globally. The courtroom was packed with press. The judge, the Honorable Marcus Wright, was a stern man who had seen the video. He looked down at Beatrice, who was wearing an orange jumpsuit because her lawyer hadn't arrived with clothes in time. She looked small, haggard, and stripped of her armor. "Mrs. Halloway," Judge Wright said, "you are charged with interference with flight crew, simple assault, and disorderly conduct. How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Beatrice cried out. "It was stress. I was provoked." Her court-appointed lawyer, because Richard had cut off access to the family firm, winced. "Bail is set at $100,000, the judge said. Beatrice looked at the back of the room, expecting to see Richard. He wasn't there. "My husband," she stammered. "My husband will pay it." A young associate from Richard's firm stood up in the gallery. "Your Honor, I represent Mr. Richard Halloway. Mr. Halloway will not be posting bail for the defendant. He has also served her with divorce papers this morning, citing irreconcilable differences and moral turpitude." The courtroom gasped. Beatrice felt the room spin. "No," she whispered. "He can't. He needs me." She spent 3 weeks in Rikers Island before her personal assets could be liquidated to pay the bond. Those 3 weeks broke her. She wasn't Beatrice Halloway there. She was inmate 784. She learned quickly that demanding the crusts cut off her bologna sandwich resulted in getting no sandwich at all. When she finally got out, the world had changed. She returned to her Upper East Side penthouse only to find the locks changed. The doorman, a man she had ignored for 20 years, handed her a box of clothes and a letter. Beatrice, per the prenuptial agreement, specifically the reputation clause regarding criminal conduct, you are entitled to a lump sum settlement of $500,000. The apartment, the Hamptons house, and the assets remain mine. You are not to contact me or any member of the Halloway family, including Sophie. Richard, $500,000 sounded like a lot. But to Beatrice, who spent that on handbags in a year, it was poverty. But the karma wasn't done. The trial came 6 months later. The jury took less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Because it was her first offense, she didn't get more prison time. The judge had something better in mind. "Mrs. Halloway," Judge Wright said at sentencing, "you treated a highly respected surgeon like a servant. You viewed yourself as above the people who clean up after you. Therefore, I am sentencing you to 1,000 hours of community service." Beatrice let out a breath of relief. "Fine, I'll work at a library. I can organize books." "No," the judge smiled. "You will serve your time with the New York City Sanitation Department. Specifically, you will be assigned to the janitorial detail at JFK International Airport. You will clean the very terminals where you thought you were a queen." The gavel banged. 1 year later, JFK Terminal 4 was bustling. Travelers rushed to their gates, coffees in hand, dragging roller bags. Near the entrance to the Sovereign Lounge, the very place where the nightmare had begun, an older woman in a grey jumpsuit was pushing a mop bucket. Her hair was grey and pulled back in a severe, messy bun. She wore rubber gloves. Beatrice dipped the mop into the soapy grey water and slapped it onto the tile. Her back ached. Her hands were raw. She kept her head down. She didn't want anyone to recognize her, though few would. The Botox had worn off, leaving deep lines of bitterness around her mouth. She wasn't the queen of the Upper East Side anymore. She was just the lady who cleaned up the spills. She paused to wring out the mop and looked up at the large television screen hanging above the departure board. It was a news broadcast, CNN. The headline read, "Medical Miracle, the surgeon who changed heart surgery." On the screen, Dr. Anthony Caldwell was standing at a podium. He looked distinguished, kind, and powerful. He was holding the hand of a 7-year-old girl. Sophie. Sophie looked healthy, her cheeks pink, her smile radiant. Richard Halloway stood behind them, looking proud. The reporter's voice floated down to Beatrice. Dr. Caldwell is being honored today with the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his work in pediatric cardiology and his humanitarian efforts. When asked about his motivation, Dr. Caldwell said, the camera zoomed in on Anthony's face. "I learned that life is fragile," Anthony said on the screen, "and that dignity is not something you buy with a ticket. It is something you earn by how you treat the people around you. We are all equal on the operating table, and we are all equal in the eyes of God." Beatrice stared at the screen. Tears welled in her eyes, hot, stinging tears of regret. She looked at the man she had called dirt. He was a hero. He was loved. He was holding the hand of the grandchild she would never be allowed to see again. And she was holding a mop. "Hey, you missed a spot." Beatrice jumped. A young businessman in a suit, talking on his phone, pointed to a coffee spill near her shoe. He didn't look at her face. He just snapped his fingers. "Clean it up," he said, walking away. Beatrice watched him go. She wanted to scream. She wanted to yell, "Do you know who I am?" But she knew exactly who she was. She was the help. She dipped the mop back into the bucket, bowed her head, and started to scrub. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how a single act of hate brought down a dynasty. Beatrice Halloway thought her platinum ticket gave her the right to dehumanize a stranger, but she learned the hard way that the higher you fly, the harder you fall. Dr. Caldwell didn't just save a life that day. He proved that true class isn't about what you wear or where you sit. It's about who you are. Beatrice lost her marriage, her fortune, and her family, forced to clean the very floors she once walked on with disdain. It's a brutal reminder. Be kind to everyone, because you never know if the person you're insulting is the only one who can save you. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please blast that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to be humble. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.